I'm 31, and my older sister Vanessa, she's 34, has somehow turned my whole existence into a rivalry I never even agreed to. 5 years back, she tied the knot with Nathan, a man in his mid-30s who's loaded, and from that moment on, she's acted like I'm beneath her. My parents? They treat her like she's some kind of success story, while I'm just the one who didn't secure my future the clever way. I've got a steady job. It's not glamorous, sure, but it pays the bills, keeps a roof over my head, and lets me live comfortably while I work towards something bigger. But in Vanessa's eyes, all that effort just looks like I'm throwing my life away. She gets a kick out of rubbing it in two, telling me that while I'm clocking hours, she's lounging in luxury. Designer shopping sprees, European getaways, a car worth more than what I make in a year, you name it. At first, I brushed it off. If that lifestyle made her happy, then good for her. But she wouldn't stop. Every time she'd stop by my apartment, she'd make these ridiculous faces, like she'd stepped into some rundown shack. You really ought to think about upgrading, she'd say, eyeing my furniture like it belonged in a thrift store clearance bin. If I treated myself to a new outfit, she'd grin and ask whether it was fast fashion or if I finally decided to splurge for once. And if I ever mentioned doing well at work, she'd let out an over-the-top sigh and say something like, "Why even bother? Just land a wealthy guy and live for real." What stung the most? My parents soaked it all in like gospel. To them, Vanessa was proof that she made all the right moves, and I was the family letdown because I actually earned my money. Every holiday or family dinner felt like a performance, Vanessa strutting in like a fashion ad, casually bragging about her shopping in Paris or some luxury spa retreat. If I brought food to a gathering, she'd crack a joke about how she forgot what budget meals tasted like. And Nathan? He was polite but cold, never said much, never stopped her either. After a while, I started wondering if she wasn't quite the queen of his world she made herself out to be. Then came the tipping point. We were all gathered at my parents' place for dinner. Everyone was supposed to contribute something, and I decided to cook one of my best dishes, a homemade meal I'd put hours into. Vanessa showed up last, glanced at what I'd made, and burst out laughing. "Oh wow," she said loud enough to turn every head. "You're still cooking? Normal people just order from somewhere decent these days." And then my parents laughed. Actually laughed. Like I'd done something pathetic. Something inside me just snapped. I didn't argue. Didn't explain. I was done defending myself to people who didn't care to listen. I just smiled, sat down, and made up my mind right there at that table. If Vanessa thought life was about marrying a bank account, fine. She could have that. But I was going to prove that success doesn't come from who you latch onto, it comes from what you build with your own hands. And I wouldn't need to shout about it. I'd let the results speak for themselves. That night, while Vanessa scrolled through photos from some beach in Greece, I stayed quiet. But once I got home, I got serious. I'd already been toying with the idea of a side hustle, something I could do without giving up my main job. Now, I was ready to go all in. I dove into research, investment options, freelance gigs, passive income strategies. And I kept it all to myself. No sense dragging negativity into my plans. A few weeks in, I landed my first freelance job. And the paycheck? It beat 2 weeks' worth of my regular salary. Vanessa didn't know. Neither did my parents. And honestly, that was the sweetest part. Because while they were still mocking me, I was laying bricks for something way bigger. After that dinner, I stopped wasting energy trying to earn their approval. If they saw me as the family failure, then so be it. I had better things to build. I kept my day job, but I started treating my side hustle like a second full-time gig. Early mornings, late nights, I pushed hard. That first freelance job turned into a steady stream of work, and before long, I was making more than I expected. Instead of spending it, I stacked it. Every extra dollar went into savings and investments, growing little by little. My friends noticed first. They saw me pulling long hours, turning down invites, glued to my laptop like it owed me money. When I finally told them what I was working on, they were all in. They hyped me up, sent leads, even hooked me up with clients. Some of them got so inspired, they started their own side hustles. My parents? Different story. Every phone call came with the same question. "So, have you met someone yet?" According to them, I was grinding for no reason, working too much, earning too little. Vanessa had the dream life, apparently. She married rich and never had to worry. Eventually, Vanessa caught wind of my side hustle. Not because I told her, my guess is my parents mentioned it, probably with a sigh and an eye roll. At the next family gathering, she wasted no time. Glass of wine in hand, she smirked and said, "So, still playing around with that little hobby?" I didn't take the bait. I just smiled, and that silence must have irritated her more because she kept going, saying how exhausting it must be, how I could just find someone and stop struggling. Then came her usual TED talk about aiming higher, which basically meant marrying into wealth like she did. I let her talk. Meanwhile, my income kept growing behind the scenes. Freelancing wasn't some instant jackpot. I started out doing low-paying gigs, just to build my resume. Consulting took time, clients came slowly, mostly from word of mouth. And investing? A bumpy ride. Some stocks dipped. One rental opportunity tanked. But I kept pushing, tweaking, learning, adapting. Slowly, those side projects became my real income. Of course, it wasn't easy. I was spread thin, working long hours, sacrificing sleep, weekends gone in a blur of emails and deadlines. But every small win kept me motivated. Vanessa, meanwhile, was still busy showing off. New designer bags, luxury dinners, 4-star vacations. Every time she posted, my parents acted like she'd won a Nobel Prize. One Sunday dinner, she bragged about dropping a ridiculous amount on shopping in Milan. My mom gasped like she'd witnessed a miracle. My dad laughed like she'd just won the Super Bowl. And me? I just sat there, quietly eating, saying nothing. That week, I'd hit a personal milestone, enough savings to start thinking seriously about buying property. But I wasn't about to share that. Not with them. The first hint that things weren't so perfect in Vanessa's world came just a few weeks later. She had been hyping up this extravagant trip to Dubai, typical Vanessa. But out of nowhere, she canceled it. No real explanation, just some vague excuse that didn't sit right. Then, in a totally casual conversation, a family friend mentioned something odd. Vanessa and Nathan had been fighting. And not just the usual squabbles married couples have, these were full-on, loud arguments. Around the same time, I noticed Vanessa's behavior toward me had shifted. Her little digs turned nastier and more frequent. If I wore something nice, she'd sneer and call it affordable luxury, like it was some kind of insult. If I drove somewhere instead of ordering an Uber, she'd let out this exasperated sigh, as if I were a lost cause. One day, I was scrolling through social media when I stumbled on something strange. Nathan had uploaded photos from a business trip. Vanessa wasn't in a single one of them. Normally, she was glued to his side on those trips, always tagging herself at fancy hotels or high-end dinners. Something was definitely off. Then came another family get-together, and Vanessa was on fire, throwing jabs at me every chance she got. She mocked my apartment again, said I'd never experience her kind of lifestyle unless I changed everything about how I live. I calmly set my drink down and finally said something. "It's wild how focused you are on my money when I'm actually the one managing it." The room fell completely silent. Nathan, who had barely spoken all evening, let out a short, dry laugh. Then, without looking up, he added, "Nothing wrong with financial independence." Vanessa's face froze like someone had hit pause. She quickly tried to change the topic, but the vibe had shifted. For the rest of the night, she was quiet, edgy. And I couldn't help noticing that Nathan never stood by her side the way he usually did. About a week later, that same family friend made another passing comment. Apparently, Vanessa's perfect little marriage wasn't so perfect anymore. Around that same time, I hit a huge personal milestone. After months of late nights, skipped weekends, and careful saving, I finally bought my first rental property. Nothing flashy, a simple apartment in a solid neighborhood. But it was mine. No co-signers, no financial help, just the result of my own grind. I didn't make any announcements. No Instagram post. I wasn't looking for claps or comments. Still, small changes in my life started becoming visible. I upgraded a few essentials, not to show off, just for comfort. A better laptop. A slightly newer car. I could treat my friends to dinner without double-checking my account balance. Of course, Vanessa noticed. At the next family dinner, she gave me that up and down look she always did, like she was running a mental checklist. Her first jab was about my watch. I'd worn that thing for years, and she had never said a word about it. Suddenly, it was budget chic. Then she made a snide comment about my car, said it looked like a backup rental compared to Nathan's. I didn't flinch. Didn't even answer. That silence just made her double down harder. But Nathan? He was different this time. He wasn't playing backup anymore. He barely acknowledged Vanessa's jabs. If anything, he looked annoyed. Then something unexpected happened. My parents started to change too. My dad, who usually laughed at whatever Vanessa said, paused for a beat before joining in. And my mom, she actually asked me about my work. Not in that polite, dismissive way she used to, but like she was genuinely curious. Vanessa didn't like that. I could see it in her forced smile. Over the next few weeks, the cracks in her fairy tale life became more obvious. It started small, Vanessa complaining that Nathan was being difficult about money. She said it like a joke, but there was something sharp in her voice. And then came more canceled trips. First Dubai, then Paris, places Vanessa would have been plastering all over social media. But now? Radio silence. Instead, she was showing up at my parents' place more often, hanging around like she had nowhere else to be. For someone with an endless stream of money, she suddenly seemed very interested in what I was up to. One weekend, I treated myself to a little solo getaway, just a cozy hotel stay to relax. I didn't post anything about it, but my mom must have mentioned it in passing because Vanessa's reaction was immediate. She wanted every detail, where I stayed, how much I spent, what I did. Then, almost on cue, she started bragging about some fancy resort she and Nathan were planning to visit soon. But they never went. The next time I ran into Nathan, something about him had changed. He looked drained, like someone who was over it. And when Vanessa made her usual dig, something about how I'd never measure up to her life, he raised an eyebrow and said, "At least she's making her own money." Vanessa whipped her head toward him so fast I thought she'd pull something. I didn't say a word. Just logged the moment. Nathan wasn't playing her game anymore, and it wasn't working in her favor. Then came the big one. Another family gathering. It all seemed normal at first. Vanessa showed up dressed like she was going to a runway show. She tossed around her usual designer name drops and backhanded remarks about my simple lifestyle. But then, out of the blue, she snapped. She accused me of being obsessed with competing against her, said I was trying too hard to make her look bad. Like everything I did was some scheme to one-up her. I looked at her and asked, plain and simple, if your life's so perfect, why does mine bother you so much? Dead silence. Vanessa's jaw clenched. My parents shifted awkwardly in their seats. But then Nathan, cool as ever, took a slow sip of his drink and dropped a bombshell like it was nothing. Vanessa had been bragging earlier about her newest luxury buy, and Nathan finally broke. "You burn through money like it's air," he said, shaking his head. "Maybe it's time I stopped funding your little shopping habit." Vanessa's face froze. Her smile didn't move, but she brushed him off with a laugh like it was just banter. Except it wasn't. A week later, the credit cards were gone. And everyone knew it. Vanessa went pale. The whole room went quiet. My parents looked at her, then at Nathan, then back at her, and for once, they didn't rush to defend her. She didn't say a word. Just got up and walked out. No big speech. No smart remark. Just quiet, seething humiliation. And, for the first time ever, I didn't feel like the family let down. I felt like I'd finally won. Word traveled fast after that. Vanessa, the golden girl, the one who married rich and never struggled, wasn't as untouchable as she pretended to be. At first, it was just whispers. A vacation quietly canceled here. A dinner out replaced with a cheaper restaurant there. The same relatives who used to gush over her started asking careful questions behind her back. Then came the confirmation. I ran into Nathan at a business networking event. Nathan and I had never really talked one-on-one before. But this time, he walked right up to me. After a bit of polite small talk, he dropped it casually. He had finally cut Vanessa off financially. No more endless shopping sprees. No more jet-setting across the globe for no reason. No more throwing cash at luxury just to keep up an image. She'd burned through an insane amount of money, spending like there was no tomorrow, recklessly, carelessly, without any thought for the consequences. Nathan had enough. He put his foot down. My parents, of course, refused to acknowledge what was going on. Anytime someone brought up Vanessa, they'd wave it off, say that all marriages hit rough patches, that Vanessa and Nathan were just figuring things out. But you could see it in their eyes. The way they'd glance at each other, then scramble to change the subject. They were nervous. They were worried. Vanessa, though, kept up appearances like nothing was wrong. Still dressed in designer labels. Still talked about fancy travel plans and new purchases. But the stories weren't lining up anymore. Those glamorous trips? They never happened. The new stuff? Most of it wasn't new at all. Her stories started sounding more like fiction than fact, like if she said it confidently enough, it would become real. Meanwhile, my world was heading in the opposite direction. My rental property brought in steady income, my freelancing was expanding, and my investments were growing stronger by the month. For the first time in my life, early retirement wasn't just a pipe dream, it was something I could actually plan for. Vanessa must have sensed the shift, because out of the blue, she started being nice to me. Not just polite, overly sweet. Too much. Complimenting my work ethic. Asking vague questions about how I managed my money. At first, I figured it was another one of her head games. But then she got more direct. Started talking about how families should lift each other up, how sometimes people just need a little help to bounce back. I let her talk. Then, during one particularly forced conversation, she dropped the act and got to the point. She needed money. She didn't call it a loan, of course. She called it support. Just a little bit. Just to get through a tough time. I looked her in the eye and told her no. She laughed at first, like I was just being sarcastic. But once it sunk in that I meant it, her whole expression changed. She rolled her eyes, scoffed, and hit me with the "what happened to family loyalty" guilt trip. I didn't bite. I didn't try to justify it. I just said what I knew was true. Being financially responsible is a choice. Not long after that, the rumors started swirling. Vanessa and Nathan were separating. At first, I couldn't believe it. She had spent years shaping her entire identity around being the wife with the dream life. But looking back, the signs had been there all along. Nathan had been pulling back for months. He stopped playing along with her public performances. He stopped enabling her. Eventually, he stopped showing up for the show entirely. And just like that, he was done. One night, Vanessa showed up at my place. Her mascara was smudged, her hair unkempt, and for the first time in forever, she wasn't dressed in anything flashy. She looked wrecked. She said she was losing everything. Told me how hard it had been. Claimed I couldn't possibly understand what she was going through. Her messages had already been sounding more frantic lately. She was unraveling. One night, she texted me, "I don't know how to get out of this." Tried to play it cool after, but the panic was leaking through every word. And now here she was, standing at my door, eyes wide with desperation. But I wasn't going to clean up the disaster she'd created. I told her the same thing I said before. She spent years acting like money grew on trees. Now, she was learning that trees don't grow back overnight. She left furious. The next day, I started getting calls, texts too. She was telling everyone I had turned my back on her. That I was selfish. That I didn't care about family. My parents jumped in instantly, calling me, messaging me, saying I was being heartless. That money wasn't everything. That Vanessa just needed a little help, a small push to get back on her feet. I didn't respond to any of it. That was the moment I completely detached from the golden child myth. For years, I'd lived under Vanessa's shadow, constantly being measured against someone who married into wealth and never had to work for anything. While I was building, she was spending. But now, she was falling apart. And me? I was finally free. Vanessa hit the one place she never thought she'd land, rock bottom. The divorce became official. Nathan was gone, and with him went the financial foundation she'd taken for granted. Her fall wasn't immediate, but it was steady. At first, it showed up in small ways, avoiding events she used to dominate, skipping out on plans, dressing a little less extravagantly. Then her Instagram started shifting from luxury lifestyle posts to appreciating the little things. When she lost the house, she played it off as downsizing. But after a while, she couldn't keep up the act. The apartment disappeared. The car? Repossessed. The credit cards? Shut down. She had no savings, no property, no fallback plan. Instead of taking responsibility, she leaned into victimhood. And my parents? Of course, they brought her back in with open arms. They didn't tell her to find work. They didn't suggest she stand on her own. They let her move back into her childhood bedroom like it was some temporary bump in the road, not the result of years of bad choices. While she regressed, I kept moving forward. I upgraded my apartment, not a mansion, but something that fit my lifestyle and growing success. I kept investing. I even started mentoring people, helping others avoid the same traps Vanessa had walked straight into. That's when Vanessa pulled another 210. She started acting humble, talking about how grateful she was for a second chance. Said she was learning from her mistakes, trying to start over the right way. At first, I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe she finally grew up. But that hope didn't last. Soon, she started slipping little hints into conversation, saying how hard it was to adjust, how she just needed some time. Then came the bigger ones, suggesting she could stay with me for a bit, just until she found her footing again. Then came the ask for money. A small loan, she called it, just to help her get back on track. I shut that down immediately. Told her flat out she needed a job, that people come back from worse all the time, that she wasn't entitled to a single dime of mine. She didn't argue. Instead, she switched tactics again, pretending to try. Talking about job applications, promising she was making an effort. But there were never any interviews. No callbacks. No actual work happening. And yet, my parents believed her every word. They kept calling me cold. Said I was heartless. That family was supposed to stick together. But I'd seen this play before. And this time, I wasn't stepping in. They kept insisting that Vanessa just needed one shot, one opportunity to turn things around, and that I should be the one to give it to her. I didn't budge. And then came the ultimate betrayal. She'd been dropping comments here and there. "You must be doing pretty well with all those investments," she said once, glancing at my laptop. Another time, she chuckled and joked, "If only I had your credit score." I didn't think much of it, just more of her usual passive-aggressive banter. But about a month later, my bank reached out about a suspicious loan application, under my name. Vanessa had stolen my identity. She had used my personal information to try and take out a loan, banking on the idea that I wouldn't notice, or worse, that I wouldn't act. I confronted her immediately. At first, she flat out denied it. But once I laid out the proof, she tried to spin it, talked about how desperate she was, how I had everything while she had nothing. I didn't waste my breath trying to argue. I filed a fraud report and let the legal system handle it. Vanessa was finally forced to face real consequences. My parents? Furious. But not at her. They called me cruel. Said I was heartless for ruining her life over one mistake. To them, I was the bad guy for protecting myself. That was the final nail in the coffin. I cut ties with all of them. No more answering calls. No more guilt trips. No more playing the family punching bag. Vanessa had spent years looking down on me. Now she was the one sinking, and for once, I wasn't trapped in her shadow. I was free. She avoided jail, but she didn't escape the fallout. She was placed on a strict repayment plan. Her credit was in ruins. She couldn't lease a car, rent a decent apartment, or apply for a credit card, not without getting denied. This woman who had strutted through life acting like money would never run out. Now she couldn't even finance a used sedan. But rather than take accountability, she fell right back into her old routine, blaming everyone else. First, it was Nathan's fault for cutting her off. Then I was the villain for refusing to help family. And when that narrative ran out of steam, she turned on our parents, accusing them of abandoning her during her greatest time of need. Meanwhile, my parents were scrambling to save face. They tried to rewrite the story, paint me as the cold, unforgiving sibling who turned his back on blood. Said I had punished Vanessa instead of showing compassion. But people weren't buying it. Extended family, friends, they weren't blind. They'd watched Vanessa's behavior for years. They saw the way she treated me. They knew how she had burned through Nathan's money like it was Monopoly cash, and how she never once tried to lift herself up. The more my parents defended her, the more people started siding with me. And without all that drama weighing me down, my life just kept getting better. I doubled down on my goals, focused on building, growing my investments, expanding my income streams. Then it happened, the milestone I never imagined reaching so soon. A major deal I'd been working on for months finally closed. And just like that, I hit 7 figures. I had become a millionaire. But it wasn't the number that meant the most, it was everything behind it. Every late night, every skipped vacation, every moment I'd spent grinding while Vanessa laughed from her pedestal, it all led here. While I was rising, they were falling. My parents had spent so much of their savings trying to bail Vanessa out that now they were barely keeping up themselves. Their attitude shifted. They didn't ask for help, not at first. But the hints came, comments about how expensive retirement had become. Little reminders of the sacrifices they made for their kids. Eventually, my mother stopped hinting and just said it outright, they needed help. I didn't flinch. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "You chose your golden child. Let her take care of you now." There was nothing left for them to say. Vanessa gave it one final shot. She sent a message saying she had changed. Said she wanted to make amends, that she finally understood everything now and hoped we could rebuild what was broken. I left her on read. Then, a week later, the truth surfaced. She was still talking behind my back. Still playing the victim. Still telling anyone who'd listened that I'd abandoned her. And at the same time, dropping hints about how she just needed one more break. One more shot. One more helping hand. That was it. I blocked her. No more second chances. No more guilt trips disguised as olive branches. No more family loyalty for people who never had any loyalty to me. Without them, my life was calm, peaceful, focused. Then came the moment that tied it all together. I was invited to speak at a major financial seminar, an event filled with some of the top names in the industry. As I stepped on stage, I glanced out at the crowd. And there he was, Nathan. After my talk, he came up to me. There was no awkwardness, no tension, just respect. He shook my hand and congratulated me. Then, with a small smirk, he said, "Dodged a bullet." I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Vanessa had spent her whole life trying to prove she was better than me. And in the end, she was the one left with nothing. And me? I was breathing. Finally, completely done with them. Vanessa hit the bottom of the barrel. No cash. No credit. No career. No rich husband to cover her mistakes. With nowhere left to go, she ended up right back where she started, living under our parents' roof, rent-free. They covered everything. Her food, her bills, even her toiletries. And somehow, they still treated her like she was just going through a rough patch instead of facing the crash she caused herself. But they weren't doing well either. Supporting her drained them dry. They wouldn't admit it, of course. But it showed. Small complaints about bills. Quiet comments about how family should stick together. It was only a matter of time before they started fishing for help again. Meanwhile, Vanessa wasn't job hunting. Not really. She told everyone she was looking, but all she ever did was bounce from one easy money scheme to the next. First, it was some overpriced skincare MLM. She spammed every friend and acquaintance she could find, acting like she was one product away from making 7 figures from home. That flopped. Then came a sketchy online investment opportunity, some promise of passive income with zero effort. She threw her last dollars into it. It bombed too. After that, she resorted to online sob stories. Emotional posts about betrayal, starting over, and how life had hit hard. Always just vague enough to make people curious. Always just desperate enough to fish for pity. She was careful not to share the full picture. Her posts were vague, filtered, full of half-truths. At first, a few people fell for it, sending her messages of sympathy, offering support, telling her to stay strong. But as time went on, even those people started to notice something wasn't right. The version of her life she was posting online didn't match the real one. She kept uploading old pictures, vacations from years ago, throwbacks to dinners she didn't pay for, trying to recycle the illusion of wealth. High-end restaurants, designer bags. Like clockwork. But people weren't stupid. They caught on. Mutual friends began asking questions. Why was she always talking about the past? Why weren't there any new photos? Any actual updates? Her reputation slowly unraveled. Friends who once envied her lifestyle started distancing themselves. People who used to hang on her every word stopped responding altogether. She wasn't a glamorous socialite anymore. She was just someone who only showed up when she needed something. Then came the ambush. My parents invited me over for dinner. At first, It seemed like any other visit, polite conversation, small talk, nothing unusual. But halfway through the meal, I saw it coming. The real reason I was there? They wanted money. They didn't ask outright, not at first. They danced around it, talking about how family should always lift each other up. About how Vanessa had been through so much and just needed a little help to get back on her feet. Then, eventually, they asked. And I said no, without hesitation. They made their choices. They spent years pretending Vanessa was the one with it all figured out, while they ignored every single thing I built with my own 2 hands. And now? Now they wanted me to clean up her mess? Not a chance. Vanessa switched tactics again. She went full emotional, tears, apologies, the whole performance. Claimed she had changed. That she regretted everything. That she just needed a second chance. But not even a week later, I found out she was still trash-talking me behind my back. Telling mutual friends I was selfish. That I'd turned on my family. That money had changed me. That was the final confirmation I needed. I was done. I cut ties completely. Vanessa. My parents. The endless cycle of guilt, manipulation, and double standards. Gone. And once I was free of all that noise, my life got quiet, finally peaceful. I started traveling more, grew my business, surrounded myself with people who actually respected me, supported me, and didn't measure my worth by whether I married into wealth. Then one day, a mutual acquaintance messaged me. Vanessa had someone new in her life, wealthy, well-established, supposedly a step up from Nathan. Just like that, she snapped right back into her old routine. Bragging, flaunting, acting like her comeback was complete. Posting photos of expensive dinners, tropical vacations, and glittery gifts. And our parents? They were ecstatic. They flipped instantly back into smug mode, acting like her entire downfall was just a rough chapter in her fabulous story. The comments were subtle, but I heard them loud and clear. It's good to see Vanessa back where she belongs. As if her whole identity was wrapped around being spoiled by a rich man. I didn't argue. I just smiled. Because I already knew how this was going to end. Something about the new guy didn't sit right with me. He was loud, flashy, always showing off like he had something to prove. Fancy cars, big gestures, over-the-top surprises, it all felt like a stage play. Unlike Nathan, who had real wealth and didn't feel the need to broadcast it, this one seemed like he was performing. Then, Vanessa announced their engagement. She framed it like a triumphant comeback, her rise from the ashes. A new ring, a new man, and supposedly, an even bigger life ahead. Our parents? They went all in. Smugger than ever. They started making snide little remarks again. About how some people spend too much time working and not enough time living. As if I was the fool for building a future the hard way. I kept quiet. Let them have their moment. Because then, the truth surfaced. Something had always felt off, and finally, it clicked. The guy? He was broke. A mutual friend filled me in. He was drowning in debt, living on credit cards and bounce checks, hopping from one sketchy investment to the next, stringing people along. He had a pattern, apparently dating women who looked expensive, who could help him maintain the illusion of being rich himself. Everything, the lifestyle, the gifts, the vacations, it was all borrowed. Vanessa had no clue. Or maybe she did and just didn't want to see it. She'd hitched herself to another fantasy, and this time, the curtain dropped fast. His financial issues went public. Trips got canceled. Credit cards started bouncing. Bills piled up. And Vanessa? Once again, she was left with nothing. No backup. No safety net. No plan B. And this time, not even our parents could spin it. It was out in the open. Embarrassing. Unavoidable. She tried to play it cool, but the damage was done. Even her friends had seen enough. People stopped answering her calls. No one wanted to be part of her latest disaster. And then, in a move that almost made me laugh, Vanessa reached out one final time. She said she finally got it. That she'd learned her lesson. That she just needed help, one more time, and maybe we could start over as family. I let her speak. Then I told her the truth. Your problem, Vanessa, is that you're always waiting for someone else to rescue you. Fix it yourself. And that was it. I blocked her. No more chances. No more games. No more pretending we were ever on the same team. And for once, my parents had to sit with the reality they created. Their golden child had nothing left. And the daughter they ignored? I had built something real. Something lasting. Something all mine. Vanessa, who once strutted around as the family's picture of success, had become a cautionary tale. No more designer bags. No adoring friends. No high society status. Just someone who burned every bridge and called it bad luck. And me? I was finally, fully, and completely free.